What if the biggest reason you're struggling with money has almost nothing to do with money? Think about that. Two people can earn the exact same paycheck, live in the same neighborhood, buy the same groceries, have the same terrible temptation to order food at midnight because suddenly cooking feels like an advanced engineering degree. And yet, one slowly gets ahead, the other ends up broke again. Not once, not twice, again. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes the person who keeps running out of money isn't irresponsible. They're actually trying. They're budgeting. They're cutting expenses. They're promising themselves next month will be different. Then payday comes, and somehow the money disappears like it was called to testify in court. So what is actually happening? Why do smart, hardworking people keep making the exact same money mistakes, even after those mistakes have already hurt them? Because there's a hidden loop underneath all of it. And once you see it, you're going to start noticing it everywhere. In your bank account, in your shopping cart, in your subscriptions, and maybe in your own decisions. Because the problem usually isn't the stupid purchase, it's the emotional decision that happened 5 minutes before it. And that's where things get really weird. Picture this. It's Friday. You get paid. You open your banking app. $2,400. For one beautiful, magical moment, you are a financial genius. You start mentally allocating everything. Rent, groceries, savings, maybe finally fixing that weird noise your car has been making. You even think, this month is different. Of course it is. This month you're disciplined. This month you're mature. This month you're basically Warren Buffett with a checking account. Then Monday happens. $68 at Target, $42 on takeout, $19 on some random thing you absolutely needed despite having lived 29 years without it. Wednesday, another $31. Friday, and you're wondering where the money went, and you don't even remember spending it. That's the part that messes with people, because spending money doesn't feel like spending money anymore. It's a tap, a swipe, a click, another click. Buy now. Done. You don't see cash leaving your hand. You don't feel your wallet getting thinner. Nothing feels real until you open the app and realize your bank account has somehow entered witness protection. And here's the first mistake. People often think they have a spending problem, but sometimes they have a distance problem. The distance between the decision and the pain. When spending doesn't hurt immediately, your brain treats it differently. A $7 coffee doesn't feel like $7. It feels like $7 from some imaginary future version of you. And future you is rich. Future you has everything figured out. Future you definitely isn't worried about rent. Future you is apparently very successful. Future you can deal with it. Except future you is still you, just older, and slightly more annoyed. But here's where it gets dangerous. Because after repeating this enough times, you don't just make the mistake, you start building a story around the mistake. I just need to make more money. I'll save next month. I deserve this. I'm just terrible with money. And that last one is much more dangerous than it sounds. There's a huge difference between saying, I made a bad financial decision, and saying, I'm bad with money. One describes a behavior, the other describes who you are. And humans are strangely loyal to their identities. If you believe you're bad with money, every mistake starts feeling like evidence. You spend $200 you shouldn't have spent. See? Bad with money. You forget to cancel a subscription. There it is, more proof. Then you have one good month and save $500. Nice. But maybe that was just luck. Then another mistake happens, and you think, I knew it. And without realizing it, you're no longer trying to fix the behavior. You're protecting a story about yourself. I used to picture a guy like this whenever I thought about the problem. Let's call him Mike. Mike wasn't stupid. Actually, Mike was the kind of guy who could explain cryptocurrency to you for 45 minutes, even though you only asked what he had for lunch. He read about investing. He watched finance videos. He knew what compound interest was. He had a spreadsheet. Of course he had a spreadsheet. It had tabs, multiple tabs, beautiful tabs. His spreadsheet probably could have filed his taxes and applied for citizenship. But Mike still couldn't build savings. Why? Because his problem wasn't information. It was emotional. Every time he started getting ahead, something happened. He'd get tired, stressed, bored, or he'd compare himself to somebody else, and suddenly he needed something. Not because he actually needed the thing, because he needed a feeling, a new phone, new shoes, dinner, a weekend trip, some tiny reward that said, at least I can still afford to enjoy my life. And this is one of the biggest money traps there is, using money to regulate your emotions. Because when life feels miserable, spending feels like relief. Temporary relief, but real relief. And your brain remembers it. Imagine you've had the worst week ever. Your boss is annoying, your car needs repairs, your relationship feels weird, your inbox looks like it was personally designed by Satan. You get home, sit on the couch, and you see an ad for a new pair of headphones. They're beautiful. You don't need them. They're also 20% off. Obviously, this is now an emergency. You buy them. For 10 minutes, you feel better. And that's not imaginary. The purchase creates anticipation, excitement, a tiny reward. Your brain gets a little hit of pleasure. And that's why telling someone, just stop buying things, is basically useless. It's like telling someone, just stop being stressed. Thanks. Problem solved. The deeper problem is that you're rewarding discomfort with consumption. And the cycle is brutally simple. Feel bad, spend, feel better. Feel guilty, feel stressed, spend again. And now you're not just dealing with money, you're dealing with a loop. And here's the weird part. The worse you feel emotionally, the more powerful small purchases can become. Because when you can't afford the giant escape, you buy the small one. You can't afford a $5,000 vacation, so you buy the $70 dinner. You can't quit your job, so you buy the $150 thing that makes the week slightly less miserable. You can't change your life overnight, so you change your Amazon cart. And for a second, it feels almost the same. Almost. That's the trap. A purchase can give you the emotional feeling of progress without any actual progress. And that brings us to one of the strangest money mistakes people make. They buy evidence that they're okay. Imagine two people. Person A has $20,000 sitting quietly in savings and investments. Their car is 10 years old. Their phone has a cracked corner. Their shoes are fine. Nobody looks at them and thinks, wow. Person B has $400 in the bank, but somehow owns the newest phone, the expensive sneakers, the nice watch, the upgraded car payment. Online, person B looks successful. And that's where social comparison gets dangerous. Because when you don't have much money, you start noticing what other people have. What they drive, what they wear, where they eat, where they travel, what they post. And you start comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. You don't see their debt. You don't see the credit card balance. You don't see the 6 months of stress behind the Instagram photo. You see the beach, and your brain says, I should have that too. So you buy the thing. Not because you love it, but because you hate the feeling of being behind. That's different, and it's much more expensive. Because now you're not buying products, you're buying status. You're buying belonging. You're buying a temporary feeling that says, I'm not losing. But here's the cruel part. People who are actually becoming financially stronger often become less interested in proving it. They care about flexibility, options, time, being able to say no. Meanwhile, someone struggling financially can spend thousands trying to look like they have options. It's backwards. And sometimes, we know it is. We just don't want to admit it. Because admitting it means admitting the purchase wasn't really for us. It was for the invisible audience in our head. There's another sentence that causes an absurd amount of damage. I can afford the monthly payment. That sentence has destroyed a lot of credit scores. Maybe not civilizations, but definitely credit scores. You see a $38,000 car, you think, no way. Then the salesperson says, how about $529 a month? Suddenly, it sounds reasonable. And your brain stops seeing $38,000. It sees $529. That's exactly the point. Monthly payments turn giant purchases into tiny psychological bites. The same thing happens with phones, furniture, subscriptions, trips, buy now, pay later, credit cards. Everything becomes future me's problem. And future you keeps getting screwed. Future you is exhausted. Future you is somehow paying for 3 versions of the same life. And this is where bad financial decisions start reinforcing themselves. Because once your future income is already spoken for, your current paycheck feels smaller. You might be earning more than you ever have, but it doesn't feel like it, because half the money is already gone before you receive it. So what do? You start chasing more income. You work harder, take extra hours, get the promotion, maybe even get another job. And that can absolutely help. But here's the uncomfortable twist. If your spending rises every time your income rises, you haven't escaped the problem. You've upgraded it. Imagine your salary goes from $45,000 to $60,000. You should feel amazing. Instead, your apartment gets nicer, your car gets newer, your restaurants get fancier, your vacations get better, your subscriptions multiply like rabbits. And 6 months later, you're making 33% more, and somehow still checking your bank account before ordering a $14 lunch. That's lifestyle creep. But calling it lifestyle creep makes it sound innocent, like your lifestyle sneaked into the house while you were sleeping. It didn't. You invited it. You just didn't notice. Because every upgrade felt reasonable on its own. A slightly nicer apartment? Fine. A slightly better car? Fine. More expensive groceries? Fine. A few extra subscriptions? Fine. Gym, streaming, food delivery, cloud storage, premium music, premium everything. You know what's funny? We've built a world where companies can charge you forever because you forgot a checkbox existed. One $15 payment doesn't feel dangerous, but 20 of them? That's $300 a month, $3,600 a year. And that's one of the sneakiest ways people stay stuck. Not through one catastrophic decision, through hundreds of decisions that are individually too small to feel important. It's death by 1,000, it's only $15. And eventually, you're not spending money on things you actually love. You're spending money to maintain a lifestyle you're now afraid to downgrade. Because once you've experienced the better version, the normal version suddenly feels like failure. That's another trap. Here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes people don't fear being poor. They fear looking poor. Those aren't the same thing. Maybe you grew up without much. Maybe you remember your parents saying no to everything. You remember cheap clothes, old cars, embarrassing moments. And somewhere along the way, you made a private promise. I'm never going back. So now every financial decision carries emotional weight. Saving money can feel like deprivation. Driving an older car can feel like regression. Cooking at home can feel like punishment. And spending becomes proof that you've escaped. That's why some financial advice feels insulting. Just cut back. Okay, but what if cutting back feels emotionally like returning to the life you fought your way out of? Now it's not a budgeting problem, it's an emotional wound. And you can't solve an emotional problem with an Excel spreadsheet. You can organize the numbers, you can't organize the pain. But here's the good news. Once you understand that, you can stop attacking yourself. You don't need to become a completely different person. You need to separate safety from appearance. Because looking successful and being financially safe are two completely different games. And the person who wins the long game often looks boring in the short game. Which brings us back to Mike. Because Mike finally discovered something that changed everything. And it wasn't another budget. Mike had finally saved a decent emergency fund. Not huge, but enough. Then his car died. He could repair it or replace it. The newer car looked easier, more comfortable, less stressful. He'd been doing well, so he told himself, I deserve it. And honestly, he did. He worked hard. He was tired. He wanted something nice. So he bought the car. 3 months later, another expense hit. Then another. And suddenly his emergency savings started disappearing. Not because the car was bad, because the decision had eaten his margin. That's the word that matters. Margin. Financially strong people aren't necessarily the people with the highest incomes. They're the people who have room. Room for mistakes, room for repairs, room for bad months, room to say no, room to breathe. When you have no margin, every surprise becomes an emergency, and every emergency becomes debt. And debt creates another monthly payment, which reduces your margin, which creates more emergencies. And now you've built a machine that keeps making you poor, not because you're lazy, because there's no room left between your income and your obligations. That's why one of the smartest financial moves can feel incredibly boring. Keeping more margin than you think you need. It won't get likes. Nobody will compliment your emergency fund. Your neighbors aren't going to knock on your door and say, "Wow, Kevin, beautiful liquidity." But when something goes wrong, you'll feel it. Instead of panic, you'll feel inconvenience. That difference is enormous. And it's one of the reasons financially healthy people can look completely ordinary. They're quietly buying freedom. Here's another mistake that gets almost no attention. People try to fix their money when they're already exhausted. They wait until Sunday night, open their banking app, see the damage, feel guilty, create 17 rules. I'm never eating out again. I'm cutting everything. I'm saving half my paycheck. This time I'm serious. Monday comes, life happens, the plan collapses, and then comes the shame. So they start again. The problem? They're relying on motivation. Motivation is terrible at paying bills. The people who consistently improve their finances usually make fewer decisions. They automate. They create defaults. They make good choices easier and stupid choices slightly harder. Imagine two people. One gets paid. Money lands in checking. They decide how much to save after spending. The other gets paid. Savings moves automatically first. Neither person is necessarily more disciplined. One person simply doesn't have to negotiate with themselves every week. That's huge, because every financial decision is a tiny argument. Should I buy this? Can I afford it? Maybe. I've been good. Just this once. And after enough arguments, your brain gets tired, and the easiest answer wins. So don't build a system that requires you to be a perfect human. You won't be. Nobody is. Build one that still works when you're tired. That's a completely different philosophy. Here's the painful part. Sometimes the biggest money mistake isn't buying the wrong thing. It's repeatedly refusing to look. Checking your account feels uncomfortable, so you avoid it. You don't want to know. You ignore the bill. You don't calculate the interest. You don't total the subscriptions. You don't check the credit card. Because as long as you don't look, you can pretend it's not that bad. I've done versions of this. Most people have. You know what's terrifying? Opening your banking app after 2 weeks of avoiding it. It's like opening the refrigerator after hearing a weird noise for several days. You already know something is living in there. And that's why avoidance is so dangerous. Not because the problem instantly gets huge, but because every day you avoid it, the problem gets harder to change. And maybe you're thinking, okay, but what if I'm genuinely not making enough money? That's real. Sometimes the math simply doesn't work. No budgeting trick can make $1,800 cover $2,300 of necessary expenses. That's not a character flaw, that's arithmetic. But even then, there are usually two separate questions. How do I survive the current situation? And how do I make sure the next version of my life isn't built on the same pattern? Those are different problems, and confusing them creates resentment. Because sometimes people need more income. Sometimes they need lower expenses. Sometimes they need to deal with debt. Sometimes they need a new skill. Sometimes they need all four. But before any of that, they need to know which problem they're actually solving. Otherwise, they keep treating a wound with the wrong medicine. Here's a simple thought experiment. Imagine I give you $20. You can spend it on anything. Coffee, food, a little luxury, whatever. Now imagine I give you another $20. Same deal. Would you spend them the same way? Probably. Now change one detail. I tell you that the second $20 has to be used to make your life a little easier 6 months from now. Not richer, just easier. Maybe you pay down a little debt. Maybe you build an emergency cushion. Maybe you pay a bill ahead of time. Maybe you buy something that helps you earn more. Suddenly, that $20 feels different. Why? Because now you see it as a tool, not a reward. And that distinction can completely change the way you think about money. Money can buy pleasure. Money can buy status. Money can buy convenience. But money can also buy distance from panic. And that might be its most underrated use. The first $500 you save isn't exciting. It doesn't look impressive. But it can stop a flat tire from turning into credit card debt. The first $1,000 isn't glamorous, but it can turn, "I have a problem," into, "Annoying, I'll handle it." Your first serious amount of savings doesn't make you rich, it makes you harder to break. That's different. And once you experience that feeling, something weird happens. Saving stops feeling like losing, it starts feeling like winning. Maybe you're not lazy. Maybe you're not stupid. Maybe you're not even bad with money. Maybe you've just been using money to solve problems money can't actually solve. Loneliness, stress, insecurity, boredom, the need to feel successful, the need to feel safe. And that's why the same mistakes keep coming back. Because the purchase changes, but the emotion doesn't. And until you deal with the emotion, your Amazon cart will keep volunteering as your therapist. But here's the good news. The cycle can be broken, not by becoming perfect, by becoming aware. The next time you want to buy something, pause for 10 seconds. Ask yourself one question. Am I buying the thing, or am I buying the feeling? That question alone can change a lot. Because once you can see the real decision, you finally have a chance to make a different one. And slowly, something starts happening. Your bank account gets healthier. Your stress gets quieter. Your options get bigger. And eventually, you stop thinking about money all the time. Which is the funny part. The point of getting better with money isn't to obsess over money forever. It's to think about it less. To have enough margin that a bad week is just a bad week, not a financial disaster. To be able to say no without feeling poor. To say yes without feeling guilty. To wake up one day and realize you don't need your next paycheck to save you. You already gave yourself some breathing room. And maybe that's what financial security actually feels like. Not looking rich, not owning expensive things, not impressing strangers. Just knowing that when life punches you in the face, your bank account doesn't have to punch you too. Because the biggest financial mistake isn't spending money, it's spending your future to make the present feel better. And once you stop doing that, you stop being trapped by the same mistakes. You finally start using money for what it was supposed to give you in the first place: freedom. If this hit a little too close to home, leave a comment with the money mistake you keep catching yourself making. No judgment. And if you want more videos like this, hit like and subscribe. We're all figuring this stuff out. Some of us just have slightly more expensive mistakes than others. And remember, you don't build wealth by becoming perfect with money. You build it by making fewer decisions your future self has to regret.